Hi everybody, this is Chapter 4 of EDUC 103, Common Chronic Medical Conditions Affecting Children's Health. This is a great follow-up to Chapter 3, and it's why I pair the two of them together, because the stuff we learned about in the last chapter works really well with this stuff as well. Once again, I give you the NACE standards, and as you see, almost every single one of the NACE standards is addressed once again in this particular chapter as well. So, it's important to know that environmental conditions are the #1 cause of a child's poor health conditions. This is critical because this can impact, a child's attendance and their performance in schools. So, what are your environmental circumstances that can contribute to a child's poor health? #1 is living in an urban neighborhood, living in a rural neighborhood, or being homeless. Different conditions occur in those areas. Suburban, not as much. Family has a poor financial situation that affects dietary quality, changes the living arrangement, and access to medical care. A child that's bouncing between two different parents all the time. They're living in two different worlds, two different types of lifestyles. Pollutants in the air, such as noise or chemicals. We have a school district that's kind of in our area, that's in Beaver County, that operates by a nuclear power plant. You can imagine if there's potential for pollutants in the air. If there's stress, trauma, or domestic violence in the house, that can be something as well. And when the traditional family unit changes from what it was supposed to be or what the kid was used to, that can also be a disruption as well. So this textbook, I need to note this. If you're reading the textbook, I like you to scan the textbook. I am not a big fan of reading it. This textbook is really urban. All of this is going to look at a socioeconomic status. So I've tried to make it, specific conditions that can be problems in your classroom or early learning center. I mentioned the socioeconomics a little bit, but it's not that big of a deal when I'm covering the stuff in this chapter because I don't want it to encompass everything that we're doing in here. Because not all of you are going to work in urban schools. So, allergies. 1 in every 5 children have allergies. I have allergies. I know a lot of people that have allergies. Go anywhere and probably somebody has allergies. Allergies are annoying. Most people will say allergies are just basically, it's a chronic illness, but it's something that's annoying. The key thing that you have to know is the difference between a seasonal allergy and a year-round allergy. The idea of pets in schools. The idea of bringing in peanut butter to schools. That certainly changed from where we are now to when I was a student in school, maybe when some of you guys were students in schools as well. So, ingestants can cause problems. Most of the time this is milk, chocolate, peanuts, oral medications. Those are your most common allergens. Inhalants, things like pollens, dust, particle matter, animal dander, perfume, and cleaning products. Different skin irritations, different soaps, cosmetics, dyes. Latex is one that affects kids frequently, so you have to be careful when you're using rubber gloves, what the gloves are made of. And injectables like insect bites and medications that are injected in the body can cause an allergenic reaction as well. So a lot of this stuff, as I normally say, you don't need me to read it, but you can take a minute and you can look at different signs and symptoms of a disorder that could occur because of allergies. So, food allergies. Less than 2% of children have food allergies. However, if you're in an elementary school with 300 kids, you can be sure that one of those kids will have a food allergy. And this has changed how we give out snacks in schools. I remember when I was a kid and it was my birthday, my parents baked me cupcakes, or they baked me brownies and they brought them into the schools. Can't do that anymore legally in our state. It has to be pre-processed, pre-packaged foods that have a list of the ingredients on them because there are certain things that kids are allergic to. Most of the time, the thing that causes the most problem are nuts. Peanuts, almonds, soybeans, milk products. Most people don't bring these into school, but they know whether or not they can have it at the cafeteria or not. The food allergies, fewer than 2%, but it's something that occurs as well. The symptoms of them, I'll read these quickly. You could have skin rashes, flushed or pale face, Cramps, vomiting, and diarrhea is very common, especially when you have 2 and 3-year-olds who don't realize they have an allergy. Runny nose, watery eyes, congestion or wheezing, itching or swelling, anxiousness, restlessness, shock, and difficulty breathing. So, management. There aren't cures for these. You can control it. That's it. So you can control it, but you can't cure it. A lot of time people will use nasal sprays as a way to treat them. And if that doesn't work, you'll get allergy shots that can control them as well. So most are not life-threatening. If they are, you'll see somebody that will have difficulty breathing, itching, it might lead to unconsciousness, and possibly death. I give you a list of the life-threatening symptoms that you have to be alert of. Wheezing or difficulty breathing, swelling of the lips, tongues, throat, or eyelids. This is a big one. That's something that you have to be very proactive of. Itching and hives, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea. These ones are tough because it might not be life-threatening. It might just be, kids having a bad day. Anxiety or restlessness, blue discoloration around the mouth and nail beds. That's another one that I would be worried about as well. So, your responsibility as an educator is to manage food allergies. You should do this aggressively and get this information from parents. Honestly, my experience at schools has shown me by 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade, every single kid has a list that's in the building and they have access to all this stuff. It's the kindergarten teachers that are ones that struggle with this because the kid's new to school. You hope the parent shares it. I would think that if my child was allergic to something, I'd tell the principal even before the school year started. Not the case all the time. But if it happens, you need to ask parents for a detailed list at the beginning of the year or during open house. Mistakes do happen, and finding ways to alleviate mistakes is everything. So asthma. Asthma causes the most school absenteeism in early childhood education, and it mostly impacts boys. Obesity correlates with asthma. One of the problems with asthma is that kids have difficulties controlling it and understanding it. Children don't overreact. Most children more often than not overreact to asthma attacks because they don't know what to do about it. They start panicking, they don't take it calmly. It's something that you as a parent or you as an early childhood provider in an early learning center have to practice with a kid to make sure that they understand it and they're prepared for it. What can cause it? Anything in the air, certain foods, obviously cigarette smoke, bronchitis and cold, stress, changes in weather condition, and heavy-duty exercise. So, what are the signs and symptoms? Coughing, wheezing, difficulty breathing, mucus collecting in the airways. Most children will actually outgrow asthma. The children that remain with it, it gets a lot more serious. But most children do outgrow it because the passageways through their airways do increase. So, our textbook says anti-inflammatory drugs. Use inhalers then after that, and then check for dust and pollen and furnace filters is the next priority that you do. So, anemia. We'll give you a list of the causes of anemia. Once again, you can read these on your own. And some of the signs of anemia as well. And we'll talk a little bit about management. Childs that are lacking in vitamins, how do you help them? Well, you give them vitamins. It's simple. But teachers have to be aware of these dietary conditions so that children can eat foods that provide them with the vitamins they need. One of the things that happens with a child that's anemic is they get fatigued very easily. You need to monitor play more for them, especially if they're on a playground and they go outside for recess for 30-minute periods, because the kid's going to think they can keep up with the other kids and they're not going to recognize what their disability is. So childhood cancer is a broad title. It's the leading cause of death among children from 1 to 14 years of age. It's generalized as childhood cancer. You're not going to find specifics on it. I mean, they'll have different types, but the impact is created on an area of a child, and there's a rapid growth of this throughout the United States. So what are some early warning signs of childhood cancer? We provide you a list of this as well. While you're thinking of this, I do want to mention that there's an organization at Penn State University called Thon that is a 48-hour dance marathon that specifically gives money for childhood cancer. They've raised tens, 20s, hundreds of $1 million over the past 15 years. It's a great organization that's really passionate about childhood cancer. It's something you should look into if it's something you're interested in. So what's important to note, I mean, cancer's a bad thing, but the survival rate has increased significantly since the 1980s and 90s. Cancer still obviously can kill you, but people survive more with cancer. Children that return to school, they're more prone to communicable illnesses because they've been through rough treatment. So the school has to manage that. What I have always said, if you have a child that's dealing with something that severe, the teacher should try to work closely with the families, work from home a little bit, give them time to heal up and rest up. Even though the kid's going to want to come back to school, giving them time to rest is probably a better notion. So diabetes, there's a direct correlation to overweight children in diabetes. It's higher growing with minorities. Growth levels have a direct impact on it, especially when a rapid weight loss occurs. Give you some of the signs and symptoms of that. You can take a minute and read that on your own. And management. Diabetes is individually treated, not universally. There's different ways to treat it. Because of this, this is something that parents really have to be involved in, and they have to make sure that the school district knows what's going on. You hope, and I've seen it, but children will actually come to you with a piece of paper that says, here's my diabetes management plan, and they'll give it to you, and that'll help teachers understand what treatment is necessary. So eczema, it's basically a skin condition that exists for 10 to 15% of all children younger than 5. Most of the time it disappears between ages 5 and 15. One of the reasons that a child will flare up with eczema is that they scratch a lot and different weather changes occur. And obviously when you're in a region where there's frequent weather changes, that can be a problem. It's not curable, it's preventive. Our textbook suggests that the best way to do it is avoid extreme weather conditions. And think about, the area that we live in, and think about the school districts that you're around. Even if the wind chill factor, if the temperature's going to be 15 for the day, but the wind chill factor is below 0, most of our school districts will cancel school because that's an extreme weather condition and could be a state of emergency. Topical cortisones should be available for the child when necessary because it'll help them avoid scratching. So there are kids that have daytime fatigue. This, honestly, regulating a sleep pattern of a child is very difficult, especially when they get to be between 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. People say that a kid will consistently go to bed at 8 or 9 o'clock, but some nights they're up till midnight, some nights they're up till 8, some nights they go to bed early. So some kids are going to be fatigued, and trust me, at the high school and middle school level, this is very common. It's not possible to manage it, and when you can provide a child with their own room, it's a great way to control the fatigue. So what are some signs and symptoms of this? I list those to you. So lead poisoning. This is on the decline in the United States. This is something, this is one of the biggest things that someone can do. One of the biggest things you need to prevent it is to be careful about secondhand older toys that might contain lead-based paints. You're not going to find these in stores anymore. They're really not a commonality. But give you some ideas of what happens with lead-based paints. Most of your schools aren't going to have them, but if you're in an older rural school district, it's something that you might potentially see. So environmental lead, big list. You can look at these on your own. One of the things that I do want to note is secondhand toys and furniture manufactured before 1978. Let me give you 2 examples of that occurring. Let's say you have a parent that is a collector of old toys. It probably is coming from lead-based paint. You have grandparents who have their furniture from the 60s that's still in existence because it's what they grew up on and they loved. Probably will use lead on it. So consider that, when you're interacting with kids. And then if they pass away and they pass it down, do you want to give that furniture to your kids? Who knows? So research has only started to prove that kids that have been contacted with lead, their IQ goes down. This is regional more than national. Some areas are prone to it than others. The best way to cure it is just by washing your hands constantly. So seizures. Seizures are difficult to difficult to pinpoint in their origin. 75% of all children are diagnosed with epilepsy, and that might surprise you, but it's a high number. 25% of all children have seizures that are undiagnosed, but then a lot of children will eventually outgrow these, and some do, some don't. I give you the signs and symptoms once again. One of the things that I always, notice that I think is important is children that are more prone to seizures have temperatures that rise very rapidly and low blood sugar. Those are probably the biggest signs that exist. So, if a child experiences a seizure in a classroom, the family must be notified immediately. In our state, there is a seizure report which goes to the pediatrician and in the school's permanent record file. And as teachers, you're going to see this is the seizure report documentation, and it's provided. So, sickle cell disease is common among African Americans. 10% carry but might not develop it. It's big in Mediterranean, Middle Eastern, and Latin American cultures as well. Signs and symptoms of it: fever, swelling, abdominal cramps and ulcers. If there's a flare-up, children will normally be hospitalized because you don't want them to have a stroke. In children, if there's a sickle cell flare-up, they're more susceptible to other different types of disease as well. So what happens with sickle cell disease? Our textbook says chronic absenteeism. Children will be normal, and then a flare-up will come out of nowhere. And teachers should be notified of children that have sickle cell disease. So that's it. These are things that will be on your PECT exam when you eventually take it, if you take it, those of you that are going to a 4-year. But, it's one of these things you should just have exposure to. So the next chapter I'm going to talk about basically communicable illnesses. So hope you enjoyed this and got something out of it. Thank you.